Oh, it's good to be filming a YouTube video on my 8mm camcorders again. And I'm doing so because today we're looking at my latest VCR acquisition. This is an RCA model Vr537 Vhs Vcr from 1993. This was a Goodwill find down in the state of Maine while I was visiting my girlfriend. And yeah, I just had to have it because this is from 1993 and I've never had a VCR from this era. All the VCRs I've ever owned were from the late 90s, early 2000s, save for my RCA VPT292, which is from 1987. So I definitely wanted to see what an early 90s VCR is like. Another reason I got this is that it's a little bit unique because this is a 4-head mono VCR, and that's not an incredibly common type of VCR. They do exist. My dad had a 4-head mono VCR, a JVC, which I wish I could have saved after he died, but someone else got it, and presumably it's in the landfill now. But it is a unique type. Normally you see 2-head mono VCRs if you pay a little bit of money, and if you paid a lot of money, you got a 4-head hi-fi stereo VCR. But this is 4-head mono, which I suppose could be could have a niche market. For example, if you wanted the higher video quality of a 4-head system, but you only had a mono television set and you were perfectly content with that, then why pay extra for a stereo VCR when you'd never be able to take advantage of the stereo audio signal? So it makes a little bit of sense if you knew what you needed in a VCR. The final reason I got this is because I think it's the end of the line for my RCA VPT292. The pinch roller on it has gone bad. It's hard as a rock. And it's gotten to the point now where it's beginning to, it slowly, minorly damages tapes as they're played. It puts tiny little crinkles in the tape. I've done research and I haven't been able to find any instructions on how to properly remove the pinch roller, and nothing I've looked at and tried made it happen. So I think it's the end of the line for that VCR. I'll probably see if I can pawn it off for the cost of shipping on the local VCR collectors Facebook groups that I'm on. Or if anybody here wants an RCA VPT292 with a bad pinch roller that otherwise works perfect and has a brand new belts put in it a few years ago for the cost of shipping, get in touch with me. But yeah, I figure this VCR might be a replacement for that one. I don't need another VCR. This makes 4 VCRs I have now: a 2-head mono, a 4-head mono, and 2 4-head hi-fi stereo VCRs. I don't need this or the other RCA when I've got 2 4-head hi-fi stereo VCRs, but I just can't help myself. You know, if this was a new VCR, if it was a newish, 4-head mono VCR, I wouldn't bother with it. But this thing's a little bit vintage. Not terribly vintage, but a little bit. And I just had to get it and see what it's like. There was another one of these. There were 2 of these in that Goodwill. The other one was a 2-head mono, but it was otherwise completely identical. It was same case, same everything. It was identical, except it was a 2-head mono. And I could have gotten both of them, but I figure why bother. I'll just get the one, I'll get the better one, the 4-head mono. So in this video, I'm going to go through an overview of this VCR. I will demonstrate it playing and recording, including a live recording demo. I'm going to hook my camcorder up to the video input and record camcorder video onto VHS. And then you'll be able to see what that looks like through a direct feed. And we'll look inside it, show you all the features, all the jazz that I do in these videos. So let's get to it. Here's the remote control for the unit. RCA called it Master Touch. And you could actually program 2 different VCRs with it, VCR1 and VCR2, because when you go into the on-screen menu on this VCR, you can set whether you want the VCR to identify as VCR1 or 2. And you could also control your TV with it. Here's your transport controls, record, frame advance. When you're pausing, you can advance the tape frame by frame. There's previous channel. I don't know if that works for the VCR's built-in cable tuner or if that's only when you're controlling a TV. There's mute. That would be when you're controlling a TV. Volume and channel controls. Volume would be for controlling a TV. Channel does work on the VCR's cable tuner. Some number buttons with the numbers completely worn off them. So this VCR must have been used quite a bit, or at least the remote was, because those numbers ain't there anymore. You've got a display button to control the on-screen display. A 100 button when you're putting in high cable channels over 100. You've got an index button. This VCR has an index feature. When you're recording, you can record indexes onto the tape and command the VCR to automatically find those indexes without you having to rewind or fast forward to try and find where you want it to be on the tape. It's got a slow mode, and the slow mode is actually variable speed, which is nice. The button is wide here. Once again, the print's worn off it, but you can press the right side of the button to speed up the slow playback or the left side to slow down. And something that is very surprising to me for a VCR as recent as this, it's manual tracking. This thing is a manual tracking VCR. It's not automatic tracking, which very much surprises me. Should I be surprised? Was it more commonplace by 1993 for a VCR to have automatic tracking? I would have thought so, but maybe not. But this one, at the very least, does have manual tracking. It is electronically controlled, though. Once again, this long button, you press the left side or the right side to adjust the tracking. And you've got buttons for the on-screen display, a program button to enter into the menus. This button also controls the VCR Plus, so this thing does have VCR Plus, which was a feature that I think was new around the time this VCR was made. And it was phased out around the early or mid-2000s when VHS was starting to go out of style. But VCR Plus was a way for you to easily program your VCR for timer recordings. You could program the show you wanted by looking up your show in the TV guide or whatever, and that instance of that show would have a VCR Plus code, and all you had to do was punch the code into the VCR, and that code would associate it with a particular schedule, the time, the day of the week, which is very cool. VCR Plus was a very cool system. I've never seen it actually be used. Going back to the remote, there's a clear button that's for used when in the settings menu, and it also clears the tape counter. Speed button for adjusting the recording speed, and then you've got an edit button. And I'm not sure what this does, because every situation I've tried it in so far, it doesn't do anything. Or actually, it does do something. It pauses the tape. That's all it does. So I haven't been able to find a manual for this thing. I don't know if this edit button does something special, like if you can dub audio onto the tape. I don't know. I haven't been able to find out. If anybody knows how to use this edit button, if it's even applicable to this VCR, get in touch with me. Oh, this button labeled off on the remote, it's literally what it says it is. It only turns the VCR off. It does not turn the VCR on. And that's so weird. Why make it this way? Why not just make it a normal power button? Anyway, moving to the VCR itself, on the left, we have the power and stop and eject buttons. Moving right, there's your play, rewind, and fast forward buttons in an interesting arrangement. And once again, we have an orange vacuum fluorescent display, very nice. With the VCR turned off, it displays only the time. With the VCR turned on, you get various other indicators, an indicator to show if it's in VCR mode or if it's just passing through whatever's coming in the antenna port to the television. And you have your recording speed. You have your channel indicator there, either a number or an L, which means the line in. And if I turn night shot on, if you can see past the glowing cathodes there, we have a bunch of other indicators. We do have transport indicators, which is very nice touch. Timer indicator, record, and we do have stereo and hi-fi indicators. So evidently RCA did make a 4-head hi-fi stereo version of this VCR. That's not all the controls though. This bottom panel does flip down. Ooh, and reveals more controls. We have a record button with XPR. XPR is the feature where you can set it to record for half an hour or 1 hour or 2 hours or what have you. We have a pause button. We can choose the tape speed, choose our input. So that goes between the line in or the built-in cable tuner. The TV VCR button right there. And our channel buttons for the cable tuner. We also have a front AV input, which is very nice. Mono, of course, so you only get the one audio jack. Above the display here, it says Integrated Cable Box Control. I'm not actually sure what that means. I don't know if it means this VCR could like tell the cable box to automatically tune to a channel if you had a separate cable box. And there you have the VCR Plus logo again. Going around the back, you have your basic set of controls: an antenna jack, coaxial television output, and you have another AV input and an AV output, and your channel 3 or 4 switch for the television output. And then our info sticker over here, Thompson Consumer Electronics, who own the RCA brand after RCA Corporation went out of business in the mid-80s. 120 volts, 60 hertz, 21 watts, VR537. And this was made in Korea. Now, made in Korea. Who is a well-known electronics company that's based in Korea? They were back then and they still are today, and we know them very well. Well, it's Samsung. I was extremely surprised to learn that this VCR was made not by Hitachi, who made many of RCA's VCRs in the late 80s and I believe the early 90s. This was not made by Hitachi. I assumed it was. I was incorrect. This was made by Samsung. This is a Samsung VCR. And I'm just very surprised because I don't think I ever knew that Samsung made their own VCRs to begin with, but it turns out they did. One person told me, this is an unverified claim, but one person told me that they had begun making their own VCRs in 1985. But regardless of when Samsung made their own VCR chassis, we know that they did, and I can tell you that they made VCRs for many different brand names: General Electric, RCA, Realistic, and Toshiba. That is the list that I have, and that's on StudioSoundElectronics.com, who sell a belt kit for this VCR. This VCR uses only one belt. That's certainly a way to tell that it's not a Hitachi mechanism, because nearly all Hitachi VHS mechanisms use several belts, anywhere between 3 and 6 belts. The only Hitachi VCRs that used only one belt were not made by Hitachi themselves. Some of Hitachi's own VCRs were made by Funai and by another company whose name now escapes me. But yeah, this is a Samsung mechanism, and so because I've never heard of Samsung making VCRs, I had no idea what to expect from this. Is a Samsung-made VCR from the early 90s a good thing or a bad thing? Well, I got some opinions from people. Some people said that they had Samsung-built VCRs and they loved them. Other people said they had Samsung-built VCRs that weren't that great. And a VCR reliability study did place Samsung, well, not near the bottom of the list, but below the halfway point. So yeah, I really had no idea what to expect from this thing. But I am very pleased to report that this thing works perfect. I didn't have to do anything to it. The belt is good, the pinch roller's good, it's still rubbery, it's got a tiny bit of shininess to it, so you can tell it's been used, but it's still very rubbery, and there's no issues at all. This thing works perfect. The video looks great, the audio sounds just fine. This thing just works a treat. I just plugged it in, I put a tape in it, and it lit right off. There was nothing wrong with this thing at all, and that makes me very happy. So let's take the cover off and see what an early 90s Samsung built VCR looks like. Getting inside this thing is very easy. There's 3 Phillips head screws on the back, and the cover just lifts off. And there's what you got in here, and it's pretty much what you'd expect for an early 90s VCR. There's still quite a bit of circuitry on here, but not nearly as much as you would find on an earlier VCR. Earlier VCRs that would have a giant circuit board on the bottom, but then you'd also have a giant circuit board on the top covering everything. And yeah, this thing is quite a bit more integrated, which is nice. But not as tightly integrated as you'd find in even later VCRs. We do have a switching power supply. And there's the RF unit that houses the cable tuner and the RF modulator for the television output. There's your pinch roller. There's your mono audio head as well as the control head. Now here's the head drum, and the head drum baffles me because if you look at this, you count the heads on it, 1, 2, and then you've made a full rotation. There appears to be only 2 heads on this thing, but I know there are 4 heads because it has a clear picture when you're paused and when you're doing forward and reverse search. So I don't know how they've done this. I don't know if there's two heads in each gap. I can see a tiny gap in the middle. So maybe there's just two heads in one space and two heads in the other. Over here is the erase head. And yeah, that's pretty much your lot. We have a daughter board sticking up here. And there's a few wires and a ribbon cable hanging around, but it's not too terribly complex. Certainly not as scary looking as the Rca VPT292. So yeah, let's put a tape in this thing and observe what this thing looks like. Put tape in here. Now sadly, this is a quick play VCR, which I didn't know quick play units existed this early. So I'm learning stuff about how VCRs evolved over time. But this has quick play, which means as soon as the tape goes in, it loads it around the head, and then it just sits there. Even if you're not playing the tape, it sits there and the head drum sits there rotating. And I don't like that because it's unnecessary wear on the tape. You're trading convenience for extra wear on the tape. But regardless, let's see it in action. You can see it's very sprightly loading the tape. It's, you know, whereas the Hitachi mechanisms, like the one in my Rca VPT292, that thing would slowly and lethargically load the tape around the head, just groaning the whole way. This thing, it's pretty sprightly. It wastes no time at all. So we'll begin playing the tape here, and there you can see the tape moving. It's very quiet. The head drum does not make much noise. I mean, for my first Samsung built VCR, I've got to say, this thing's pretty nice. The mechanism seems just really nice. It's super quiet and smooth operating. And it's, you know, it's lasted this long. It worked perfect first time when I plugged this thing in and tried it. Yeah, it's working very well. I have to give a thumbs up for at least an early 90s Samsung VCR mechanism. It seems like a very well made and well designed unit, just, you know, from a layman perspective. Looking on the screen, you can see the play indicator there. I can do a forward search. And we're doing a forward search. You can see that blinks there, very, very nice. Do a reverse search. And it's only one speed for forward search and reverse search. I'll do those again, giving you a view inside. So forward search. And reverse search. And I'll press stop. And it just stops moving the tape, keeps the head moving. I believe you can turn the power off. Yeah, when you turn the power off, it loosens the tape and it spins down the head. So you've got that at least. Turn it back on. Head spins back up. And it tightens the tape around it again. So fair enough. Let me do rewind and fast forward. We'll do fast forward. So there it's ramped up to full speed. Not a particularly fast forward, but that was to be expected on a VCR of this age. I can take the remote and hit the display button. Now you can see the tape counter. Let me do a rewind. Rewind is very fast, much faster than fast forward, so that's nice at least. Get a nice fast rewind. Hit stop. Comes to a stop pretty immediately. So yeah, it's, you know, I've said this already, but it seems like a very nice mechanism. I really don't see anything terribly wrong with this. reliability wise, well, it's held up for 26 years. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with what I'm seeing with this VCR. I'll eject the tape. Alright, now let's go through the on-screen menu. So this VCR does have an on-screen display and on-screen programming. That was a thing that came about in the tail end of the 80s. Now, I prefer a VCR that can be front panel programmed, that doesn't have any on-screen stuff. Everything's enunciated on the display. Everything's programmed with a whole bunch of buttons. But there's no denying that on-screen programming was just a simpler way to do things as VCRs became more complex and more capable. So we press the before I go into the menu actually, something really annoying is that when you change the display to show the tape counter, the on-screen display has the tape counter too. And there's no mode in which you can show the tape counter on the VFD and not on the TV. That kind of sucks, but oh well. So of course the on-screen displays, you've got it fully enunciated, the date, the time, the current record speed. Let me set that to SP for our test later. What input you're showing. Oh, actually when you do that, the display disappears after a little while. But then you've got the tape counter, that stays all the time. Oh, and then you've got a tape counter with a memory, the memory mode. All the memory mode means is that if you rewind or fast forward, the VCR will automatically stop when the counter reaches 0. So that's kind of a nice feature to have. So I press program here. And you can program your VCR Plus. It simply says enter the plus code number. You can put in a regular program, a one-time program, daily or weekly. Very nice. You can review your program, set the VCR clock, and set up VCR. Basically, you set whether the cable tuner is going to receive cable TV or just through an antenna. You can auto-program the channels, so you don't have to skip a bunch of channels with no signal. It can automatically program. It can automatically scan through all the channels and program the ones that actually have signal coming through. And it says set up cable box. Is a cable box being used with the VCR for all channels? Turn on the cable box and tune it to channel 2. Enter the output channel of your cable box. Oh, interesting. So it looks like the VCR can control a separate cable box. That's very, very cool. Program to end. You can set up VCR Plus, and then you can set whether the remote controls VCR 1 or VCR 2. And now that I've set it to VCR 2, none of the buttons I press do anything until I press the VCR 2 button on the remote. I will set it back to VCR 1, then press the VCR button on the remote, and press program to end. Whoop, there we go. Well, that's pretty much a demonstration of all the on-screen programming. Let's finally get to the bread and butter and do a video demonstration. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hook this camcorder up to the AV input on the VCR. We're going to make a recording directly to VHS tape. I will play the tape through the AV output back into the camcorder to record it before digitizing it on the computer over FireWire. I explain this in every video I do, but people always ask me, how do you get the video from the VCR onto the computer? I've got to make a video someday. Someday, I've been meaning to do it for literally years. Someday I'm just going to make a video showing how to get video from your VCR to your computer, or at least my method for doing it, which isn't the method most people do. But anyway, I've got a tape in, I've got it rewound. Let's do a recording test. I'm pretty excited. Alright, we are live from VHS. We are making a recording onto the Rca Vr537 4-head mono VHS VCR from 1993. And hopefully this is coming out just fine. We are recording in the SP speed to begin with. There's our little record indicator, the VHS inserted indicator, and the play indicator, our tape speed. And I'll press the display button here to get our tape counter. And something kind of neat I noticed is that, of course, and I already knew this, of course, but the VFD isn't actually orange. It's the natural, cool green VFD color. It's just filtered orange. And if you look back here, You can actually see the natural color of the VFD. So that's kind of nice. So this is a single belt mechanism, and that single belt just does the tape tension for the reels of the VHS cassette. So the capstan, it's a direct drive capstan, and there is a separate loading motor that's gear driven, and the idler is also a gear system. It's an idler gear rather than an idler wheel, and that's nice because wheels are rubber and rubber can wear out. Of course, plastic gears can also break, but I think it's far less likely for a idler gear to break than an idler wheel to wear out. So here we are recording an SP. Let me switch it to LP. I think we can do it on the fly. Yes, we can. We are now recording an LP. And because this is a mono VCR, so it's a linear audio track, the sound quality will be degraded because of the slower moving tape. The bandwidth is reduced. Wow and flutter will be increased. But because the video is a 4-head system, video quality shouldn't suffer much at all. That's one of the big upsides of a 4-head VCR, is video quality is not hit too much by recording in the slower speeds. But mono audio and linear stereo audio, because there were a few VCRs, only a few in the 80s that had linear stereo, so it was 2 linear audio tracks side by side, they can be hit hard by recording in the slower tape speeds. But a hi-fi stereo system, because the audio is helically scanned by the head drum just like the video, it doesn't suffer, or it only very minorly suffers from recording in the slower tape speed. So we've been recording in LP. Let's switch to SLP. We're now recording in SLP. So the audio quality is probably degraded even farther, but hopefully video quality isn't hit too much. You can see the tape moving very slowly. It takes a lot of engineering to be able to fit a video signal onto tape moving that slowly. You have so little bandwidth to work with that they just had to engineer the crap out of a system like this to make it work at a reasonable quality. And that's made possible by helically scanning the video and by a bunch of electronics that can just work to squeeze the absolute most signal into that allowed bandwidth that you can. So we've been recording in SLP. To finish the test, I'm going to switch back to SP. And we're once again recording in SP, and you should see that the audio quality has gotten a lot better now, and probably the video quality's gotten a little better. So I'll conclude the test here. Now my job is to rewind the tape, play the video back into my camcorder where I can then digitize it on the computer. But for you guys, we'll just be continuing on with the video. Well, that is all there is to show of the Rca Vr537 Vhs Vcr from 1993. I have to say, I really love this thing. I really, really do. I had no idea what to expect when I bought it for $4 from a thrift store. I had no idea what to expect when I learned it was made by Samsung. But I'm just in love with this thing. I really, really like this VCR. I love the design of it. You've got sort of a mix of style elements from the 80s, like the display on the right and the cassette door to the left of it, and the flip down door, and elements from the 90s, like the slightly simplified electronics compared to 80s VCRs, which will no doubt be more reliable, and rubber components that aren't going to crap, and stuff like that. I'm a big fan of this thing, and I really like that Samsung mechanism. It seems to be a very fine mechanism. So yeah, 2 thumbs up from me for this thing. So yeah, this is going to be a great VCR to beat around with. My 2 4-head hi-fi stereo VCRs, I only ever use when I'm doing archival projects. But whenever I'm, playing around with a VCR for the sake of playing around with a VCR, I always like the older ones just because I think they're cooler. And this one definitely fits the bill. And I think it's going to be a good replacement for the RCA VPT292 from 1987. Like I said, the pinch roller on that VCR has gone bad. I did some research and studied the thing to see if I could replace the pinch roller, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. And I just it's not worth my time or money anymore, in my opinion. So if anybody wants that VCR, again, it works perfect. It's just the pinch roller's completely shot, and it's got brand new belts in it as of a few years ago. If anybody wants that for the cost of shipping, get in touch with me. But I won't be using that VCR anymore because it's starting to damage tapes. But this thing is great. I really love this thing. It's going to be really nice and fun to use. And that's all for this video. So thank you very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed a piece of historical videotape equipment. And I'll see you next time.